The jackhammer's relentless pounding echoed through the quiet suburban neighborhood of Oak Ridge Estates, drowning out the distant chirping of birds and the occasional passing car. Michael Donovan wiped sweat from his brow as he observed the construction crew tearing apart the concrete surrounding his once pristine backyard pool. 6 years of pool ownership had taught him one undeniable truth: the damn thing wasn't worth the hassle. "How much longer do you think?" Michael called out to Rico, the foreman of the demolition crew, who was busy marking sections with bright orange spray paint. Rico shrugged, adjusting his hard hat. "Another day, maybe two. Filling the hole is the easy part. Getting all this concrete out, that's what takes time." Michael nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and nostalgia as he watched the pool, once the centerpiece of countless summer barbecues, being systematically destroyed. The decision hadn't been easy, but after calculating the thousands spent annually on maintenance, chemicals, and repairs for something they used maybe 10 weekends a year, the choice became obvious. His wife Sadie had been pushing for the change for years, dreaming of the expansive garden she would create in its place. "Daddy, is my pool really going away forever?" Michael turned to find his 8-year-old daughter Emma standing at the patio door, her stuffed giraffe clutched tightly against her chest. Her expression was solemn, tinged with a particular brand of dramatic tragedy only children can truly master. "Yes, sweetheart," Michael said, walking over and kneeling down to her level. "But remember what we talked about. We're going to have a beautiful backyard with a treehouse and a fire pit for roasting marshmallows. And when you want to swim, we can use the community pool that's always clean and doesn't require Dad to spend every Sunday testing water chemistry." Emma considered this, her head tilting slightly. "Can the treehouse have a slide?" "Absolutely," Michael promised with a smile, ruffling her hair. The relative peace of the moment was shattered by a shrill voice calling over the fence. "Excuse-me, what exactly do you think you're doing?" Michael closed his eyes briefly, summoning patience. He knew that voice all too well. Patricia Wilkerson, the self-appointed neighborhood watchdog who lived in the Tudor-style home directly behind theirs. In the 3 years since Patricia had moved in, she had filed complaints about everything from the height of their grass to the color of their mailbox. "Just a home improvement project, Patricia," Michael called back pleasantly, standing and turning toward the fence where Patricia's perfectly highlighted blonde bob was visible over the top. "That looks like you're removing your pool," Patricia stated, her voice sharp with accusation. "Yes, we're taking it out and landscaping the yard instead." Patricia's face, tightened with displeasure, now fully appeared as she stood on what must have been a step-ladder on her side of the fence. "You can't do that." Michael blinked, genuinely confused. "I'm sorry. You cannot remove that pool." Patricia enunciated each word as if explaining something to a particularly slow child. "It affects my property value. My realtor specifically mentioned the gorgeous pool view when I purchased this home." Michael stared at her, momentarily speechless. From behind him, he heard Rico let out a low whistle. "Patricia," Michael finally said, keeping his tone deliberately even, "this is my property. The pool is on my property. I'm allowed to remove it if I want to." "Actually, you're not," she snapped, her eyes narrowing. "There are neighborhood covenants about maintaining aesthetic standards. Removing an in-ground pool definitely violates that. I'm on the HOA board in case you've forgotten." Michael hadn't forgotten. Patricia made sure everyone remembered her position of minor authority at every opportunity. "I've already checked with the HOA," he replied, feeling a small spark of satisfaction at Patricia's momentary surprise. "There's nothing in the covenants about removing pools. I had all the proper permits from the city, too." Patricia's face flushed an interesting shade of red. "Well, I'm calling an emergency meeting. This is unacceptable. That pool increases all our property values. What's next? Are you going to paint your house some garish color? Plant vegetables in your front yard?" Emma tugged at Michael's sleeve. "Daddy, why is the angry lady yelling about our pool?" "The angry lady," Patricia said icily, "is trying to protect this neighborhood from people who don't care about property values." Michael felt his patience evaporating like chlorine in summer sun. "Patricia, I've done everything by the book. Now, if you'll excuse us." "This isn't over," Patricia declared, disappearing behind the fence with a dramatic flourish. Not by a long shot. As if to punctuate her departure, the jackhammer started up again with renewed vigor. Michael sighed heavily, looking down at Emma's concerned face. "Don't worry, sweetie," he assured her, though a knot of tension had formed in his stomach. Some grown-ups just don't like change. Later that evening, as Michael recounted the confrontation to Sadie over dinner, his phone lit up with a text from their next-door neighbor, Tom. "Heads up," the message read. "Patricia's going door to door collecting signatures to stop your pool removal. She's telling everyone it violates some ancient HOA rule and that you're doing this to spite her specifically. Most of us are ignoring her, but thought you should know." Michael showed the text to Sadie, who rolled her eyes. That woman needs a hobby yet isn't making our lives difficult. Maybe I should have consulted her personal approval before making decisions about our own backyard, Michael joked weakly. Don't you dare give her that satisfaction, Sadie warned, pointing her fork at him. We've wanted to do this for years. We're not backing down because Hurricane Patricia is having a meltdown. Michael nodded, though he couldn't shake the feeling that Patricia wasn't going to let this go easily. Experience had taught him that she had a particular talent for escalating minor issues into neighborhood-wide drama. What he didn't anticipate was just how far she would take it, or that before the week was out, he'd be explaining the concept of property rights to a very uncomfortable police officer on his doorstep. 2 days later, the demolition crew had made significant progress. The concrete deck had been completely removed, and the fiberglass shell of the pool now sat exposed like an enormous bathtub, ready to be extracted from the earth. Michael felt a growing sense of excitement as he envisioned the transformation his backyard would soon undergo. His optimism, however, was short-lived. Mr. Donovan, a man in a crisp button-down shirt and khakis, approached him, clipboard in hand. I'm Greg Matheson from the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association. Michael's stomach tightened. He'd been expecting this visit since Patricia had stormed off. Morning, Greg. What can I do for you? Greg shifted awkwardly, clearly uncomfortable with his assigned task. We've received several complaints about your ongoing construction project. Several? Michael raised an eyebrow. Or just one very persistent complaint? Greg glanced down at his clipboard. The board has concerns that removing an in-ground pool might negatively impact the neighborhood's overall appeal. Mrs. Wilkerson has brought to our attention that she personally enjoyed looking at my pool from her window. Michael finished for him. Greg, I checked the Edgewood bylaws thoroughly. There's nothing that prevents me from removing a pool on my own property. I have all the necessary permits from the city. He gestured toward the house. Would you like to see them? That won't be necessary, Greg replied quickly. But Mrs. Wilkerson has cited bylaw 7.3 regarding significant aesthetic alterations to property viewable from neighboring lots. Michael stared at him. You're kidding me. I'm afraid not. She's calling for an emergency EHOA meeting tomorrow night to discuss the issue. The board would appreciate it if you could pause construction until after the meeting. Michael felt his blood pressure rising. The crew is already scheduled. I'm not paying them to sit around while Patricia tries to control what I do with my own backyard. Greg winced. I understand your frustration, but Dad. Emma's voice cut through their conversation as she came running from the side of the house, face flushed with excitement. The tree guy is here to talk about my treehouse. Michael smiled at his daughter, grateful for the interruption. I'll be right there, Em. Turning back to Greg, he kept his voice level but firm. I've followed every rule and regulation. I'll attend your meeting, but the work continues. Greg looked like he wanted to say more, but only nodded before retreating down the driveway. As Michael consulted with the arborist about the massive oak tree that would soon support Emma's dream treehouse, he noticed Patricia standing at her back fence, phone held high, apparently taking photos or videos of the construction site. When she saw him looking, she made a show of typing something on her phone before turning and marching back into her house. Everything okay? Asked the arborist, following Michael's gaze. Neighbor dispute, Michael said simply. Nothing to worry about. But by that evening, there was plenty to worry about. Michael returned home from picking up dinner to find Sadie fuming in the kitchen, her laptop open to the neighborhood's private Facebook group. You need to see this, she said, turning the screen toward him. Patricia had posted a series of photos of their backyard construction, accompanied by a lengthy, impassioned plea about neighborhood degradation and selfish homeowners destroying property values. She had tagged dozens of neighbors and encouraged them to attend the emergency HOA meeting to protect our community standards. The comments section was a battlefield. While several neighbors defended Michael and Sadie's right to renovate their own property, others had rallied behind Patricia, expressing concerns about setting a dangerous precedent. She's turning this into World War II, Sadie said, scrolling through the comments. Over a pool we barely used. Michael set the takeout bags on the counter, his appetite suddenly gone. I'll talk to her. Maybe if I explain our plans for the yard. I already try, Sadie interrupted. I went over there this afternoon with sketches of the landscaping design. She wouldn't even open the door. Just shouted through it that she'd see us at the meeting. Michael rubbed his temples. This is ridiculous. It gets better, Sadie said grimly. Check your email. In his inbox, Michael found a message from the Oak Ridge Estates HOA with the subject line, CAs and desist, pool removal. The email, clearly drafted with Patricia's influence, demanded that all construction stop immediately pending review, citing potential bylaw violations and threatening fines of $100 per day if work continued. They can't do this, Michael muttered, though doubt crept into his voice. I called Rod, Sadie said, referring to their friend who happened to be a real estate attorney. He says they're on extremely shaky ground. The bylaw they're citing is about putting in gaudy decorations or painting your house hot pink, not removing a private swimming pool. Michael nodded, relieved. So we keep going? Rod says yes, but he's coming to the meeting tomorrow night, just in case. The following morning brought a new development. Michael stepped outside to check on the progress, only to find Rico and his crew standing idle beside their equipment, looking confused and annoyed. A woman from the city's permit office was examining paperwork. What's going on? Michael asked, approaching them. The woman looked up. Mr. Donovan, I'm Lisa Chen from Municipal Permits and Inspections. We've received a complaint that your project may be in violation of local water drainage ordinances. Michael stared at her in disbelief. We have all the proper permits. Yes, I see that, she confirmed, reviewing the documents. Everything appears to be in order, but when we receive formal complaints, we're required to investigate. Let me guess, Michael said wearily. The complaint came from Patricia Wilkerson. Lisa's professional demeanor didn't waver, but her slight hesitation told Michael everything he needed to know. I'm not at liberty to disclose who filed the complaint. After inspecting the site and confirming that everything was indeed up to code, Lisa gave them clearance to continue. But the crew had lost nearly 2 hours of work time, and Rico informed Michael that Patricia had approached them directly, warning them they were participating in illegal construction. My guys don't want trouble, Rico explained. If this keeps up, it won't, Michael assured him, though he wasn't feeling nearly as confident as he sounded. That afternoon, while Sadie took Emma to a playdate, Michael was startled by an aggressive pounding on his front door. He opened it to find Patricia standing on his porch, arms crossed, 2 other neighbors, whom Michael recognized as fellow HOA board members, flanking her like lieutenants. This has gone far enough, Patricia announced without preamble. You're destroying neighborhood property values out of pure spite. Michael took a deep breath. Hello, Patricia. Would you like to come in and discuss this calmly? There's nothing to discuss, she snapped. The board has convened an emergency session and voted to issue a temporary injunction against your construction project. One of the other board members, Michael thought his name was Darren, looked distinctly uncomfortable. We're just asking you to pause until the full neighborhood meeting tonight, he added in a more conciliatory tone. This isn't a request, Patricia continued. It's a requirement under HOA bylaws. If your crew shows up tomorrow, they'll be trespassing. Michael felt a surge of anger but kept his voice steady. Patricia, you know that's not how this works. The HOA doesn't have legal authority to issue injunctions. That's something courts do. Patricia's eyes narrowed. You want to take this to court? Fine. I have a cousin who's a lawyer. We'll get a real injunction. On what grounds? Michael challenged. Destruction of neighborhood aesthetic value, violation of implied covenant, intentional infliction of emotional distress. Patricia's voice had risen to a near shout. Emotional distress? Michael couldn't help but laugh. Because I'm removing my own pool. You knew how much I value that view. You're doing this deliberately to decrease my property value because you've always been jealous of my house. The accusation was so absurd that Michael was momentarily speechless. The awkward silence was broken by the sound of a police cruiser pulling up to the curb. All 4 of them turned to watch as an officer stepped out of the vehicle and approached the house. Patricia's expression shifted from anger to something like smug satisfaction. Officer, she called out, I'm glad you're here. We're having an issue with a homeowner violating HOA regulations. The officer, a middle-aged man with a weather-beaten face and tired eyes, climbed the porch steps slowly. His nameplate read Ramirez. Good afternoon, he said. We received a call about a disturbance. Patricia stepped forward. Yes, that was me. This man, she pointed accusingly at Michael, is refusing to comply with HOA directives regarding unauthorized construction. Officer Ramirez turned to Michael. Sir. Michael found himself in the surreal position of having to explain to a police officer why he was allowed to remove his own swimming pool. As he spoke, he could see the realization dawning on Officer Ramirez's face that he had been called out for essentially nothing. What none of them realized was that the confrontation was being recorded. Tom, Michael's next-door neighbor, had heard the commotion and begun filming from his side of the fence, a decision that would soon turn this neighborhood dispute into something much more public than any of them had anticipated. Officer Ramirez stood on Michael's porch, his expression shifting from professional concern to barely concealed irritation as he processed what was happening. He glanced from Patricia's indignant face to Michael's exasperated one, then to the 2 uncomfortable HOA board members who seemed increasingly eager to be anywhere else. Let me make sure I understand the situation correctly, Officer Ramirez said, his voice measured. Mr. Donovan is removing a swimming pool on his own property. He has all the proper permits from the city. And you, he turned to Patricia, called the police because you believe this violates homeowner association rules. Patricia lifted her chin. Officer, perhaps you don't understand the legal weight of HOA covenants. They're binding contracts. This man is in breach of contract, which is against the law. Officer Ramirez removed his hat and ran a hand through his salt and pepper hair. Ma'am, HOA disputes are civil matters, not criminal ones. The police don't enforce HOA regulations. But he's refusing a direct order from the board, Patricia insisted. The officer turned to the two board members. Are you two also on this HOA board? The taller one, Darren, nodded reluctantly. Yes, but... And did the entire board vote on this order? Officer Ramirez asked. Darren and the other board member exchanged uncomfortable glances. Well, technically, we had an emergency subcommittee meeting, Darren admitted. Patricia called it this morning. It was just the three of us. I see, Officer Ramirez said, his tone making it clear that he did indeed see exactly what was happening. And does your HOA bylaws allow for 3 members to make binding decisions without notifying all homeowners? That's not relevant, Patricia interjected. What's relevant is that he's destroying property values out of spite. Michael, who had been watching this exchange with growing disbelief, finally spoke up. Officer, I have all my permits and approvals here. He held up a folder. I followed every legal requirement. The HOA bylaws don't specifically prohibit removing a pool. I checked before we started. Officer Ramirez nodded. Mr. Donovan, I believe you. This isn't a police matter. He turned back to Patricia. Ma'am, I strongly suggest you take this up through proper HOA channels or, if necessary, civil court. But please don't call the police for this type of dispute again. We have actual emergencies to respond to. Patricia's face flushed crimson. So you're refusing to do your job? I'm a taxpayer. I pay your salary. The officer's expression remained professional, but his eyes hardened slightly. Ma'am, my job is to uphold the law, not to referee neighborhood disagreements. Filing false police reports or misusing emergency services can result in fines or charges. Consider this a warning. A warning? Patricia sputtered. I'm the one being victimized here. Do you have any idea how much my property value will decrease without that pool view? That's enough, Patricia, said the second board member, speaking for the first time. She was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes who Michael recognized from community picnics. The officer is right. This isn't a police matter, and the way we've handled this isn't following proper HOA procedure. Patricia whirled on her. Whose side are you on, Carol? The side of reason, Carol replied firmly. We have a proper meeting scheduled for tonight. This, she gestured around the porch, this isn't how we do things. Officer Ramirez seemed relieved that someone else was talking sense. I suggest everyone take a step back and cool off. Mr. Donovan has the right to renovate his property within city guidelines, which he appears to be following. Any HOA concerns need to be addressed through your established procedures. This isn't over, Patricia hissed, pointing a finger at Michael. Not by a long shot. Actually came a new voice from the sidewalk. It might be best if it was over. Everyone turned to see Tom, Michael's next-door neighbor, walking up the driveway with his phone in hand. Behind him, several other neighbors had gathered, drawn by the unusual sight of a police car in their typically quiet neighborhood. Tom, Michael nodded in greeting, confused by his neighbor's timely appearance. Sorry to intrude, Tom said, but I couldn't help overhearing the commotion. He held up his phone. I'm recording it. Patricia's eyes widened. You are recording me? That's an invasion of privacy. Officer, arrest him. Officer Ramirez sighed deeply. Ma'am, you're on someone else's property having a loud conversation in public view. There's no expectation of privacy here. Tom cleared his throat. I think the neighborhood would be very interested to hear how you've been representing the HOA, Patricia, especially the part about the emergency subcommittee that nobody else knew about. Are you threatening me? Patricia demanded. Not at all, Tom replied calmly. Just suggesting transparency. As the HOA treasurer, I'm particularly interested in how you authorized Greg to issue that cease and desist email using HOA letterhead without a proper vote. Darren and Carol both turned to Patricia with surprised expressions. You said the whole board had approved that email, Carol said slowly. Patricia waved a dismissive hand. Details. The point is, Tom interrupted, that you've been using your position on the board to wage a personal vendetta. And I have a feeling the rest of the neighbors might have something to say about that at tonight's meeting. As if on cue, Sadie's car pulled into the driveway. She stepped out, taking in the scene with wide eyes, her husband, 3 HOA board members, a police officer, and a growing crowd of neighbors all gathered on their front porch. What on earth is going on? She asked, helping Emma out of the backseat. Emma spotted the police officer and her eyes lit up. Cool. Are you here to see our construction? Dad's building me a treehouse where the pool used to be. Officer Ramirez's stern expression softened as he looked at the little girl. Is that right? Sounds like a great project. It's going to have a slide and a rope ladder and a secret compartment for my special rocks, Emma informed him seriously. That sounds much better than a pool, the officer agreed. Patricia made a strange choking sound. This is ridiculous. Officer, are you going to do something or not? Yes, ma'am, I am, Officer Ramirez replied. I'm going to leave since there's no law being broken here, and I strongly suggest that everyone else do the same so this family can enjoy their evening. He turned to Michael. Sorry for the disturbance, sir. Not your fault, Michael assured him. Thank you for your time. As Officer Ramirez descended the porch steps, Patricia called after him. I'll be filing a complaint with your supervisor. The officer paused, then turned back with a weary expression. That is your right, ma'am. Please do include in your complaint that you called the police over illegally permitted home renovation because you didn't like the view from your window. I'm sure the chief will find that very interesting. With a tip of his hat to Michael and Sadie, he continued to his cruiser. Patricia stood frozen for a moment, then turned to the small crowd that had gathered. Well, is no one going to stand up for property values in this neighborhood? For standards? The neighbors exchanged glances, but no one stepped forward to support her. In fact, several people were looking at their phones where Tom had apparently shared the video he recorded. I think, Carol said carefully, we should continue this discussion at the proper meeting tonight, where all board members and interested homeowners can participate. She looked at Michael apologetically. I'm sorry about this, truly. As the impromptu gathering began to disperse, Patricia remained rooted to the spot, her face a mask of fury and disbelief. You'll regret this, she said to Michael, her voice low and intense. I have friends on the city council. I know the head of the building department. This isn't over. Patricia, Michael said tiredly, it's just a pool. It's not worth all this. It's not about the pool, she snapped. It's about people like you thinking you can do whatever you want without considering how it affects others. Mommy, Emma said, tugging on Sadie's hand and pointing at Patricia. Is that the angry pool lady? Why is her face so red? Patricia's eyes bulged at being referred to as the angry pool lady, and for a moment Michael thought she might actually explode. Instead, she turned on her heel and stormed down the driveway, nearly colliding with Rico, who was returning from his lunch break. Everything okay, Mr. Donovan? Rico asked, watching Patricia march away. Getting there, Michael replied, putting his arm around Sadie's shoulders. I think it's actually getting there. Inside the house, as Emma ran off to play and Sadie poured them both much-needed glasses of wine, Michael checked his phone to find dozens of text messages and notifications. Tom's video of the confrontation had already made its way through the neighborhood's digital grapevine. So Sadie said, handing him a glass, think we should still go to this meeting tonight? Michael took a long sip of wine. Absolutely. I have a feeling it's going to be very interesting. What neither Michael nor Sadie could have anticipated was just how interesting the meeting would become, or how quickly Patricia's campaign against their pool removal would backfire in such spectacular fashion.